Welcome to the stream, live on Al Jazeera and YouTube. I'm Femi OK. How old were you when you cast your first election vote? 18, 19, maybe even your early 20s? Well, in Lebanon, most people under the age of 30 have never had the chance to vote for who they want in parliament.
Now, many young Lebanese voters are relishing the chance to cast their ballots in the country's first legislative elections since 2009. And with many new parties and independents entering the race, they have a wide choice. I'm Malika Bilal.
Today, we'll speak to Lebanese candidates who are aiming to shake things up after nearly a decade of political stasis. More than 900 candidates are running for seats in Lebanon's general election this Sunday, and many are hopeful that a revised election law will benefit them.
Lebanon's last parliamentary election was held in June 2009, and since then, the current parliament has extended its term 3 times, citing security concerns amid the war in neighbouring Syria, as well as disputes between parties before the new electoral law was agreed.
While Prime Minister Saud-Hariri's Future Movement and the Shia Hezbollah party are expected to do well, many new groups are aiming to make their mark too, including Sabaa 7. They have joined forces with other civil society groups and independents to form a 66-member coalition known as Kollona Watani. We are the nation. The coalition members say they are a real alternative to established parties who are stuck in their ways.
Lebanese voters living outside the country have already had a chance to cast their ballots first under the new electoral law. These voters in Riyadh turned out on Friday. About 83,000 Lebanese expatriates registered to cast their ballots in places as far afield as the United States, France, and Australia.
Joining us today to discuss how new parties and candidates are aiming to win support, we have Victoria Al-Kurri. She is co-founder of the Sabaa party and a parliamentary candidate in the Mattoon district. She joins us from the Lebanese capital, Beirut.
Also from Beirut, we have Nadine Musa. She's a lawyer who is also running as a parliamentary candidate within the National Coalition Group this year. In 2014, she became the first woman to run for the Lebanese presidency. Naila Jaja is a lawyer and member of Libaladi. That's a civil society movement within the National Coalition. She's also in Beirut.
And also from Beirut, we have Habib Abata, an investigative journalist and a filmmaker. He's founder and editor-in-chief of the Beirut Report. That's an online news site. Welcome, everybody. I have to say that Habib is very close to you. He's in Lebanon, but we have a very long delay because he's in the studio. So excuse the satellite delay. It will be an exercise in patience. Habib, it's good to have you here. Can you describe what it must be like for a country to have their first elections after 9 years? What is the atmosphere like? How are people reacting and treating this upcoming election?
What's the atmosphere like of an upcoming election?
Well, people are actually very excited.
Yeah, Habib, please continue.
I think we're talking over each other. But I'll just continue. You know, I mean, it's a very competitive environment. For the first time, we're seeing almost 1,000 candidates. We're seeing over 100 women candidates. People are really feeling that there is a possibility of change in the air. But I think they're also realistic. You know, we can't expect too much. But I think what's also interesting that's happening is that the election campaigning is very different than in past years. So we're seeing kind of different political culture emerging in Lebanon, different political practices. So it's also about, I think, the race itself, not necessarily the outcome. So, I mean, I think that we're seeing a lot of issues being raised for the first time. People are really questioning the leadership and what they've done for the past 10 years, the fact that they have canceled the elections, the fact that we're sitting in almost a toxic waste situation here in Lebanon today as a result of some of their failures. So there is some accountability. There are some questions that are happening right now. And I think it's the first time that most people are actually excited about Lebanese elections that are outside of the political establishment.
Victoria, you're campaigning right now. How are you campaigning differently that you might not have done had there been a succession of elections, one after another after another?
In fact, I'm campaigning like against power and against millions of dollars, while I come from a civil society background, and then this is what would define my campaign. It's a natural one, counting on people, counting on canvassing every day, going from a region to another, spending time on the streets, talking to people in their stores, in their garage, in their going to knock door door to door to canvas, to talk to them, and even doing activities, special activities and different from the standard ones, like participating in rally papers or doing the training over a fire camp. And even for the billboards, like I didn't pay for any billboard. I don't have any billboard. I launched a campaign on Facebook saying that on the neighbors' balconies, and then I had my friends, my family, my neighbors calling me to put my photos on their balconies without, because I can't afford billboards, especially that they are like everywhere. You should see the streets to understand what I'm talking about.
Well, it's that face-to-face contact that you're having that I think is really making an impact on people. At least that's what people online are telling us. And Naila, I know that you've been doing some of the same, going door to door, talking to people on the street. I wanted you to take a look at this tweet from Samir. He says, if you're Lebanese and age 30, chances are you've never participated in parliamentary elections. The current government extended its mandate 3 times since 2009 without a referendum. Since 2009, several crises have emerged in Lebanon: garbage crisis, refugee crisis, regional conflict, human rights violations. The youth expect a rational response to these issues, and yet the situation keeps getting worse. So, Naila, you could see this as the youth seeing this as their chance, excitement that they get to change things, or are they looking at it as same old as usual? What are people telling you?
Well, we can really see the excitement really on the streets, and while working with the volunteers, with all the youth who will be, as you said, they will have the first chance to vote. We have more than 600,000 Lebanese young ladies and men who's gonna vote for the first time. And as the tweets were saying, I mean, we went through a very extremely critical phase over the past 9 years. But it wasn't only about crisis. Well, of course, the current political parties are they really showed that their performance is extremely weak. But on another note, and I tend to be positive, we managed and we succeeded to accumulate many achievements on the social level, from social movements, from very different campaigning. We managed in 2016 to be a very major actor in the municipal elections, and then also we managed on the union level. So it wasn't only about crises, but I would say that we are succeeding in building a very serious, solid, sustainable, reformist platform, and hopefully the results are going to be extremely positive in the parliamentary election. And the major achievement that we managed to do is to group everyone on the same table and to have a national coalition in 9 districts in Lebanon, which is extremely, extremely challenging. But we managed to do it. And I think this is one of the major achievements, and it's going to be a push, and it's going to really motivate and mobilize people to vote for alternative new political parties.
So one of the aspects of this upcoming election is the impact that young people may actually have on this election. United Nations Development Programme talked to young people in Lebanon about what they wanted, what are their demands. Have a look at this video. I will read through some of them. Young people's demands. I just want to stay in my country. Young people want to work in Lebanon with a good salary. More powerful civil society and respect for minorities in Lebanon. They can't continue their master's degree because it requires a lot of money. Then how can young people achieve their ambitions? Security in Lebanon, to create jobs, to improve security and economy. We do have competencies, but if you don't have connections, then you have nothing. All right, Nadine, so many, that's a big wish list for what young people want. I suspect that's what most people in Lebanon want. The key issue for you in this upcoming election is what?
The key issue is for those young people to know and realize that this is not an election like any other election. And May 6th is not an ordinary day. It can be a historic day, and they have to be part of this historic day. It can be a historic day because for the first time in our modern history, many young people are voting, like you mentioned. And for the first time, we have an introduction of the proportional system that will allow independent candidates out of the traditional political establishments that are mainly political dinosaurs, have a chance to really represent the young, the women, all the marginalized citizens who have been neglected for decades in their conditions of living and in their basic rights and services. So we have an opportunity. I want to especially address this to the young people. They have an opportunity today on May 6th to really be represented in the next parliament, which is a major step forward.
So you mentioned political dinosaurs there. There's someone who is running, a parliamentary candidate, who would probably agree with you, at least on that point. Have a listen to Lucien, who sent us this comment.
I'm a writer and a director, and I'm also an activist and running for the parliamentary elections happening this Sunday in Lebanon. I'm mostly running because we, as citizens of Lebanon, most of us have lost any kind of confidence or trust in the people who are supposed to be representing us in parliament, especially after they self-extended 3 terms for themselves and also given trust to governments who have failed to provide basic, very basic services for the Lebanese people.
So Habib, you heard his issues there, and as we've heard, there is a new system in place that could change some of the things he sees as problems. This is Christian on Twitter, who says, with this new system, you have the chance to vote for a representative who doesn't need to satisfy one of the blocks to gain political influence. Some of the voters might think that it's more difficult to vote when you have more options, and some of them think it's a great thing. So Habib, what effect do you think that this new electoral law will actually have in practice?
Well, it's a new law, and in some ways it's a very complicated law. I'm not sure that everybody understands it, but the good thing about it is that it allows more than just one winner. You know, the winner-takes-all system that we've seen in a lot of even Western democracies. Here, you know, the first and second place get to get both some seats. They get to split seats. And so this opens the opportunity for more groups to possibly, you know, slip into power, even if they don't get the majority of votes. So it's an interesting development. There could be some surprises. So that's new, right? Having surprises in Lebanese politics is unusual because usually the political bosses and the establishment parties, they really control everything. And they've also, of course, you know, they've gerrymandered the districts in a way that suits them. So obviously there's still that. So it's not an ideal situation, but it is a bit of a change. It is opening some opportunity and giving people some hope. I think it's very important to have a little bit of hope in Lebanon because a lot of people have lost hope and they're very apathetic about elections. They believe nothing will ever change in the country. But I think change is really inevitable and it happens in any environment. And we are living in change today just by virtue of the fact that how Nayla said that, you know, they've organized this national list. Before independents weren't able to organize very well. And so there's a whole machine of organizing and getting people together that's very new, and that's the kind of work that needs to be done. So in some ways, I think we're seeing a laying of the foundation for change in the future, even if it might not happen right away.
I just want to say one thing, Habib. I totally agree with you that for these elections, it will be based on hope, while for the previous elections, it was always based on fear or on hating the other group or the other party. It was like a result of the war that we lived. And now these elections is 100% based on our hope of building a new Lebanon. Because when we talk about 66 candidates, this is more than half of the parliament, which means that we are really presenting a new way of doing politics because we just need it. We just need to see that politics can be done in a different way because the old way just didn't work.
So Naila, I want you to help us unpack this electoral law because you are a lawyer, so you can be my wing woman. So I want to take a look at the electoral law. It was passed last year. Naila, if I say anything wrong, you can just correct me live on air. I'm very humble with this one. So for nearly 30 years, the seats in Lebanon's parliament have been allotted 50-50 between Muslim and Christian sects. Did I get that right, Naila?
Yes.
All right, so that division...
Yeah,
so that division stays in place underneath this revised law. So this is what is new. This has never happened before. What is new is that voters in 15 districts must select a list of allied candidates plus their favoured individual candidate in a proportional system, and that replaces the previous winner-takes-all rule. What do you think? I mean, it's hard to know before we actually have the election, but do you think that's going to make a significant difference, Naila?
Well, of course it will. I think the first difference was introducing the idea of campaigning based on a program and not based on one person or one leader. Because in the majoritarian electoral system, the idea was, okay, you have the leader of this party or this confession, and then whatever program they have, it doesn't really matter. What is extremely interesting in the proportional law, and this is what we've been fighting for the past like 40-50 years, is that based on these lists and based on this proportional system and the fact that we have a group of people who are candidates in one list, this means that the fight is between programs and not between persons. And this is why people are having more confidence in our lists, because we are putting a program on the table, we are putting a discourse on the table, whereas the other political traditional parties, unfortunately, they are still stuck in, this threatening messaging and fighting each other on personal basis and just condemning each other without putting something substantial and that would speak to the people's needs and to the people's demands and to their people's general interest. So I think this is the first achievement that we already did during the campaigning, and I'm certainly and positively sure that the results, even if we're not gonna win the 66 seats, I mean the fact that we are running together, the fact that we're gonna have substantial results that will be our credit to build on after the election in order to have a sustainable reformist platform. We're not working on a short-term...
Nadine is itching to get in there because clearly she has some thoughts on what you're saying.
True. I would like to change a little bit in what I've been hearing from Habib and mainly all the political analysts that tend to consider that we have no chance to win. This is not correct, and I don't agree with it. I think we do have big chances to win because they always have been a tendency to consider that the elite, the political elite, the establishment elite, has been elected by all the Lebanese people. This is not true. The maximum score, they do not represent all the Lebanese people. They represent, to the maximum, half of the Lebanese people. So you have half of the other half of Lebanese people who do not feel represented at all by this political establishment. And they have to know and understand and realize that they can make the whole difference, to make a difference and be part of the change they are aspiring for, and change this political Jurassic Park we're living in into a real democratic country that we dream of and up to our ambitions. So what's very important is for the other half and the new voters to understand that, and not to listen to the established pronostics that we're not going to win, maybe we'll win 1, maybe we'll win 7, maybe we'll have few wins. I do not agree at all with such a statement.
Nadine, I hear you're there, and I see Habib also wants to jump in, but I want to bring in our community because there's one point here that we haven't talked about, but it's obvious if you're watching the show and not just listening, and that is the number of female candidates that are part of this this year's poll. So this is Doha Madani. She says Lebanon currently has a record number of women running, which is absolutely thrilling. Our country continually elects the same same old men into parliament, and it'll be great to get representation for women, especially considering how long it took to repeal a marital rape loophole. That's a separate issue there, but someone else here has a little bit of caution. Lena says, after rejection of a 30% quota for women candidates, women had to fight harder to submit their candidacy, and hopefully some will win seats, echoing you there, Nadine. But she says women's presence doesn't necessarily mean power for women, and that women in politics will support women's interests. Victoria, do you want to pick up there?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
the problem in the list that we have now is that the political parties, the traditional political parties, did not nominate women from within the parties. They only get, I would say, help from independent women to make sure that they have women on the list, but it doesn't mean that they are giving them the preferential vote. While in our list, in Kollona Watani list, we were aiming to have 50% of the candidates women. We only got 30%, which is good already, but it's not because we wanted to have just the 30% quota. This is what we were able to do in a short period. But the women on Kollona Watani list, all of them are not there just to have women on the list. They are there because they deserve it. And if they get to the parliament, they will be talking about women issues, national issues, because we do believe that any issue is related to women in the same time. It's a long fight, we know that, but a lot of chances are there for women to vote. And I think that women voters will show that in the ballots in few days.
I want to go back to Habib. Nadine, I hear you. I'll come straight back to you. I want to go back to Habib because we do have that longer delay with him via his Twitter page here. Habib, adding some colour to this conversation. As new independent parties inspire change, Lebanon's political establishment reminds us why change is needed. Supporters of Prime Minister al-Hariri seen here painting a camel in his party colours. If these parties cannot respect animals, can they respect humans? I want you to look at some of these pictures here, and here, and here. Now,
my God.
Nadine was saying that you don't reckon that the independent parties are going to do that well, but this change is needed. Your response is what to Nadine?
Oh, my response to Nadine. Well, I think that I don't disagree that there's an opportunity for a change. I think we are living in change right now. I think the independents are having a big influence on this election because of the issues they're raising. The way that they're campaigning, for example, we're seeing independents at a trash dump with masks on campaigning, whereas we're seeing Hariri, for example, the political elite, throwing big parties, lavish parties, giving away free gifts. Just a lot of, actually abusing the public spaces, abusing animals even, just kind of taking over the spaces, putting their posters everywhere. And so there's a real interesting contrast that's being drawn between the traditional campaigning and the new campaigning, which focuses on issues and not just plastering your face everywhere or telling people they have to vote for you out of fear. So I am optimistic, I think, in the long run, but I think we have to be realistic as well. We can't underestimate the power of the political parties. They will win, by and large, most of the seats. We all know that. And why is that, though? Is it because people are backwards? No, I think we have to consider the context of Lebanon. We're coming out of a war in Lebanon. It's not the war leaders are still leading the country, so the war in some sense is still on in the country. So we're still in a kind of a warlike environment. We're in a crisis environment. There's a lot of opportunity to exploit people, and so let's be realistic at least and say that we are building a platform, we are changing the discourse. Even having platforms is a change in Lebanon. The candidates themselves, the established candidates, are also being influenced, I think,
Nadine
by
and Victoria
the
and
independents.
Naila. We're at the end of the show. I know I keep you for the next 3 hours and we'd still be discussing the election. All right. May the 6th, you will follow it on Al Jazeera English, I'm sure. Thank you so much, guests, for being with us today. Conversation continues online as always, #AJStream. So be sure to be with us for our next episode of The Stream. We will be looking at World Press Freedom Day. We will examine the challenges that journalists face as societies across the world are ever more divided.
So be sure to keep your comments coming on Twitter and YouTube.
Thanks for watching. See you online.